She handed him a DNA test at his divorce celebration. What he discovered next made him speechless. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Betrayal. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Ethan Carter leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as the cool night breeze swept across the rooftop bar. The view of the Los Angeles skyline was breathtaking, but nothing felt more freeing than the thought that he was finally done with his toxic marriage. His friends had convinced him to throw this divorce celebration, and he had to admit, it wasn't a bad idea. Come on, man. Lighten up, his best friend, Jordan, nudged him, grinning as he raised his glass. You should be happy. You just got rid of the worst mistake of your life. Ethan let out a short laugh, clinking glasses with him.
Yeah.
I should be celebrating. And in some ways, he was happy. The past 6 years with Olivia had been a nightmare, constant fights, accusations, and a marriage that had died long before the papers made it official. Olivia had always been controlling, always making him feel like he wasn't good enough. And when she finally cheated on him, he knew he had to walk away. Tonight was supposed to be his fresh start. No more drama. No more lies. Just him, his friends, and a future full of possibilities. The music pounded through the speakers, the bartender pouring round after round of drinks as Ethan's group got louder. Laughter filled the air, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt like himself again. That was until he saw her. The entire rooftop seemed to go quiet as Olivia walked in, her black dress hugging her body like she had planned this moment to perfection. Her long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She wasn't here to blend in. She wanted attention. And she was walking straight toward him. Ethan stiffened. His friends immediately noticed. What the hell is she doing here? Jordan muttered, sitting up. Ethan clenched his jaw. No idea. His heart pounded in his chest as Olivia finally reached him. She stood there, her lips curved in an unsettling smirk, holding a white envelope in her perfectly manicured hands. Hello, Ethan, she purred. Ethan didn't move. His grip on his glass tightened. What do you want, Olivia? Her smile widened. I just came to give you a little parting gift. Ethan narrowed his eyes. He had known Olivia long enough to recognize that look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she knew she had the upper hand. The same look she had when she twisted the truth to make herself the victim. Whatever it is, I don't want it, Ethan said coldly. Oh, trust me, Olivia said, holding out the envelope. You need to see this. Ethan hesitated. His friends watched, waiting for his reaction. Finally, he snatched the envelope from her hand and ripped it open. His eyes darted across the document inside. His stomach dropped. It was a DNA test. His name was listed at the top. And so was the name of his 6-year-old son, Caleb. His breath hitched as his eyes scanned the result. Paternity result. Not the father. Everything around him seemed to fade. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all disappeared into a deafening silence. His hands trembled. His son wasn't his. The boy he had raised, loved, and protected for 6 years wasn't his. He looked up at Olivia, his face pale. She smiled. That same smug, heartless smile. Surprise, she whispered. Ethan felt like the ground beneath him had crumbled. His chest tightened. His hands turned cold. The people around him were talking, but their voices sounded distant, muffled. He could barely register the murmurs of confusion from his friends. His heart pounded louder and louder. This had to be a mistake. It had to be. His mind raced. He thought back to the moment Caleb was born, how he had held him in his arms for the first time. The sleepless nights, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees he had kissed better. He had loved that boy with everything in him. And now Olivia was telling him he wasn't his father? Ethan's breathing grew heavier as rage surged through his veins. His hands curled into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't going to give Olivia the satisfaction of a public scene. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "What the hell is this?" he hissed. Olivia tilted her head, feigning innocence. "A simple truth, Ethan. One that you deserve to know." His jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "Why now?" She chuckled, tapping her chin. "Well, I figured since you're so happy about being free, you should be completely free. No attachments. No responsibilities." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He had known Olivia was cruel. But this was another level of evil. Caleb was his world. And now, in the middle of a damn rooftop bar, she had taken that away from him. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shake her until she told him it was all a lie. But Olivia had already won. She stepped back, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "Enjoy the rest of your night, Ethan." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, broken, shattered, and utterly speechless. For the first time in his life, he didn't know who he was anymore. And worse, he didn't know what to do next. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the DNA test in his shaking hands. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, everything blurred into the background. Olivia's heels clicked against the rooftop floor as she walked away, each step hammering the final nail into his world. His chest felt tight. His heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the voices around him. "Caleb isn't mine?" The thought alone made his stomach twist violently. His head spun, his legs felt weak, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter, a man known for always being in control, had no idea what to do next. "Ethan?" Jordan's voice snapped him out of the daze. He turned his head slowly, eyes blank. "Bro, what the hell just happened?" Jordan asked, his face full of concern. The rest of their friends had gone silent, their drunken energy sobering up as they watched Ethan like he was about to explode. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat felt dry. He swallowed hard, then held up the paper in his trembling hands. Jordan took it, his eyes scanning the document. His face twisted in shock. "Holy shit." Ethan let out a sharp breath, raking a hand through his hair. He needed to get out of here. Without saying another word, he stormed past his friends, pushing through the crowd. He barely heard their voices calling after him as he bolted down the stairs, his mind racing faster than his feet. Olivia had blindsided him. Again. But this time, she had destroyed him. Ethan barely remembered driving home. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The city lights flashed past him, but he didn't register them. His mind was a storm of memories. Caleb's first steps. Caleb's first words. Caleb's sleepy voice calling him Daddy. A painful lump formed in his throat. 6 years. 6 years of bedtime stories, of scraped knees, of whispered I love yous. 6 years of believing that Caleb was his son. And now? Now he was supposed to believe that it was all a lie? Ethan slammed the brakes as he reached his house. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely remove the keys from the ignition. He stumbled inside, his vision blurred. His home felt different now, cold, lifeless. The pictures on the walls, the little toys still scattered across the living room, the tiny sneakers by the door. Everything felt like a cruel joke. With a strangled breath, Ethan grabbed the nearest object, a glass on the kitchen counter, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, the pieces flying across the floor. But it did nothing to ease the pain in his chest. Nothing at all. Ethan sat on the couch, staring at the floor for what felt like hours. His head throbbed, his body tense. Then, without thinking, he pulled out his phone and dialed Olivia's number. It rang once. Twice. She picked up. Well, that was fast. Olivia's voice was as smug as ever. I thought you'd at least spend the night drowning in whiskey before calling me. Ethan clenched his teeth. Why? Silence. Then a low chuckle. Why what? Don't play games with me, Olivia, he snapped. His voice was dangerously low, controlled. Why did you do this now? Why not 6 years ago? She sighed dramatically. Because, Ethan, I wasn't sure back then. And, to be honest, I didn't really care whose baby he was at the time. You were willing to be the father, so why ruin a good thing? Ethan's hands curled into fists. You used me. Oh, don't act so wounded. You got a son out of it, didn't you? A son who isn't mine. Ethan's voice cracked, the raw pain slipping through. There was a pause. Then Olivia spoke again, her tone more serious. Look, Ethan. You were a good dad to Caleb, but he deserves the truth. I did what I had to do. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. You did what you had to do? You dropped this on me in the middle of my divorce celebration. Well, it had to come out sooner or later, she said lazily. Besides, now you can move on. No baggage. Baggage? Was that what she thought Caleb was? Just baggage? Ethan was breathing hard now, his entire body trembling. Who? Olivia went silent. Who is his real father, Olivia? A pause. Then, good night, Ethan. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone in disbelief. She was hiding something. He could feel it. And he wasn't going to stop until he found out everything. Ethan barely slept that night. His mind refused to shut down, replaying every moment of the past 6 years. But by morning, something inside him had changed. The pain was still there. The betrayal still burned. But now, there was a fire in his chest. A need for answers. He wasn't just going to sit back and let Olivia control this narrative. She had played him for a fool once. That wasn't happening again. Ethan grabbed his phone and made another call, this time to his lawyer. Mr. Carter, the man greeted. Didn't expect to hear from you so soon after the divorce. I need something, Ethan said, his voice sharp. A new DNA test. A proper one. And I need to find out who the real father is. There was a pause on the other end. Ethan, if the previous test already stated. I don't trust Olivia. Ethan cut him off. She's hiding something, and I need to know the truth. The lawyer exhaled. All right. I can arrange that. Ethan hung up and leaned back in his chair. He wasn't just going to accept Olivia's word. He was going to dig. And something told him he wasn't going to like what he found. Ethan sat in his car outside the DNA testing facility, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had barely slept, his mind consumed by questions. The test results from Olivia's surprise attack were still burned into his memory, but he wasn't taking them at face value. He needed answers. Real answers. His lawyer had pulled some strings to get an expedited test. Ethan had swabbed Caleb's toothbrush and sent the sample in first thing in the morning. Now, after hours of restless waiting, he was here to pick up the results. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and walked inside. The receptionist greeted him with a polite smile. Mr. Carter? He nodded stiffly. Your results are ready. Dr. Reynolds will meet you in room 3. Ethan's heart pounded as he followed her instructions. Inside the small consultation room, Dr. Reynolds, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, greeted him. He held a sealed envelope in his hands. Mr. Carter, he said, his voice calm. I understand this is a difficult situation, but I want to remind you, whatever is in this envelope doesn't change the love you have for Caleb. Ethan's jaw clenched. Just give it to me. The doctor hesitated before sliding the envelope across the table. Ethan grabbed it, his fingers trembling as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the document, heart hammering. And then, 99.9% probability of paternity, Ethan Carter. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His vision blurred. He read it again. And again. It didn't change. Caleb was his son. His world tilted. Olivia had lied. Ethan's shock turned to rage. His blood boiled as he stormed out of the clinic and into his car. He could barely think straight as he sped toward Olivia's house. She had manipulated him, humiliated him, torn his heart apart for what? Why? By the time he reached her apartment, his hands were shaking with fury. He pounded on the door, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Seconds later, Olivia swung the door open, her expression smug, until she saw his face. She barely had time to react before he shoved the DNA test in front of her. You lied, Ethan hissed, his voice dangerously low. You stood in front of all those people and told me Caleb wasn't mine. But guess what? He let out a bitter laugh. He is. Olivia's face paled. For the first time, she looked shaken. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, trying to close the door. Ethan shoved his foot between it and the frame. Don't you dare, he growled.
Why?
Why the hell would you do this? Olivia looked away. I thought. You thought. Ethan barked out a laugh. That's *T, Olivia. You knew exactly what you were doing. She swallowed hard. Then, after a long silence, she sighed. Fine, she muttered. You want the truth? Here it is. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. I'm listening. She exhaled. I wanted to hurt you. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? Olivia crossed her arms, her eyes filled with something strange. Regret? Guilt? Or just calculation? I wanted you to feel what I felt when you divorced me, she admitted, her voice flat. You were so happy to be rid of me, throwing a damn party like it was some kind of victory.
She scoffed.
I wanted to ruin that happiness. Ethan stared at her in stunned silence. She had done all this, destroyed him, shattered his world, just for revenge? You're sick, he whispered. Olivia shrugged. Maybe. But you hurt me first. Ethan took a step back. He suddenly felt disgusted, not just with her, but with himself for ever loving her. Stay the hell away from me, he spat. And if you ever try to take Caleb from me again, I will make sure you regret it. He turned and walked away, his heart still pounding. But he wasn't done yet. There was still one more mystery to solve. The rage still burned in Ethan's veins, but beneath it was something else, confusion. Olivia's lies didn't make sense. Why had she even thought Caleb wasn't his? If she had wanted revenge, she could have pulled any stunt. Why go that far? Something still wasn't adding up, and Ethan intended to find out what it was. That night, he started digging. Old messages, old emails, bank transactions, anything that could explain Olivia's behavior. And then just after midnight, he found it. A hospital bill from 6 years ago, paid by an unknown man. Ethan's stomach twisted as he clicked on the attached details. The payment had been made exactly 1 month before Caleb was born. And the name attached to it? Jordan Reynolds, Ethan's best friend. His hands went ice cold.
No,
this couldn't be what he thought it was. He grabbed his phone and dialed Jordan's number. After 2 rings, his best friend picked up, his voice groggy.
Ethan?
Man, it's late. Meet me now. Jordan hesitated. Wait, what's wrong? Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. Don't make me say it twice. Jordan was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. All right, he said. I'll be there in 10. Ethan hung up, his entire body tense. He had a feeling he was about to uncover something much, much worse. Ethan sat in the dimly lit cafe, his knee bouncing under the table. The place was nearly empty, except for a waitress wiping down the counter. The air smelled like burnt coffee and stale bread, but Ethan barely noticed. His mind was racing. Jordan Reynolds, his best friend, his brother in everything but blood, a man he had trusted with his deepest secrets. And now, Ethan had a sinking feeling that Jordan had been hiding a massive secret of his own. The door swung open, and Jordan stepped inside, his face unreadable. He spotted Ethan and walked over cautiously. Man, what's going on? Jordan asked, sliding into the seat across from him. You sounded crazy on the phone. Ethan didn't waste time. He slid his phone across the table, the hospital bill glowing on the screen. Explain this, he demanded. Jordan barely glanced at it. It's a hospital bill. What's the big deal? Ethan clenched his jaw. It's Olivia's hospital bill, he clarified. Paid a month before Caleb was born. By you. Jordan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something Ethan didn't like. I help a lot of people, Ethan, he said smoothly. Olivia was struggling at the time. She needed help. Ethan's nails dug into his palms. Don't lie to me, he said through gritted teeth. Tell me the truth. Jordan sighed and leaned back in his chair. All right, he said after a long pause. You want the truth? Here it is. Ethan braced himself. Olivia wasn't sure if Caleb was yours, Jordan admitted. She told me she had been with someone else. Ethan felt his stomach drop.
Who? He demanded.
Jordan hesitated. Ethan's blood ran cold.
Who, Jordan?
Jordan rubbed his face. Me, he finally muttered. Ethan's world shattered. His best friend, the man he trusted with everything, had slept with his wife. Ethan shot up from his seat, so fast the chair scraped against the floor. His vision blurred with rage. You bastard, he spat. Ethan, listen. Ethan grabbed the edge of the table, fighting the urge to lunge at Jordan. How long? His voice was dangerously low. Jordan swallowed hard. It was just once, he said quickly. She was upset. You two were having problems. Ethan's fist slammed into the table, making Jordan flinch. That doesn't justify it, Ethan growled. You were my best friend. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jordan said defensively. And she told me Caleb wasn't mine, that she was sure he was yours. That's why I never said anything. Ethan laughed bitterly. You expect me to believe that? You expect me to believe you just helped her out of kindness? Jordan exhaled. I swear, Ethan, I wasn't trying to betray you. But when Olivia told me she wasn't sure, I panicked. I wanted to make sure the baby wasn't mine. That's why I paid for the tests back then. Ethan stared at him, his heart pounding. And Jordan hesitated. Ethan clenched his fists. And what, Jordan? Jordan exhaled heavily. And I never got the results. Ethan's body went rigid. What do you mean you never got the results? Jordan ran a hand through his hair. Olivia told me later that she had taken care of it. That she was sure the baby was yours, so I didn't press. I thought. You thought? Ethan repeated, his voice sharp. You thought it was okay to sleep with my wife, hide it from me, and then trust her word instead of checking for yourself? Jordan rubbed his temples. I know it was wrong, all right? But I never wanted to destroy your family. Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. His best friend,
his wife,
both had betrayed him. And yet, there was one final question haunting him. What if Jordan was Caleb's father? What if Olivia had manipulated both of them? Ethan's anger burned hot, but beneath it, a horrifying realization settled in. They still didn't know the truth. And Olivia, she had made sure they never would. Ethan turned sharply. We're getting another test, he said. Jordan looked stunned. What? Ethan's voice was ice.
We are getting
another test. Jordan hesitated before nodding slowly. All right, he said. Let's do it. 3 days later, Ethan sat in the same DNA clinic, staring at a new envelope. Jordan sat beside him, his leg bouncing. Neither had spoken much since that night. The doctor placed the envelope in front of them. Ethan picked it up, his hand steady despite the storm raging inside him. He pulled out the paper, scanning the results. And then, everything stopped. His heart,
his breath,
his thoughts. 0% probability of paternity. Ethan Carter. Caleb wasn't his son. But the next line made his blood run ice cold. 99.9% probability of paternity. Jordan Reynolds. Ethan felt his entire world tilt. Jordan sucked in a sharp breath. Oh my God, he whispered. Ethan slowly turned to him, his body rigid. Jordan looked just as stunned. I didn't know, he said, his voice shaking. Ethan stood abruptly. His vision blurred, and his chest tightened. Caleb, his Caleb, wasn't his. For 6 years, he had loved that boy, raised him, fought for him. And Olivia had lied about everything. A hollow laugh escaped Ethan's lips. Olivia had won. She had destroyed him, just like she wanted. But as the initial shock faded, something else crept in. Determination. Olivia thought she had taken everything from him. But if she thought he was going to let her walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. Ethan clenched his jaw. She had no idea what was coming. And this time, the game was over. Ethan stood outside Olivia's house, his fists clenched at his sides. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Tonight it ended. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. Olivia had played him for 6 years. Now it was his turn. He knocked sharply. A moment later, the door swung open. Olivia stood there in a silk robe, her hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders. She looked surprised to see him, but quickly masked it with a smug smile. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "What brings you here, Ethan?" Ethan held up the DNA results. Her smirk faltered. "Want to explain this?"
His voice was calm. Too calm.
Olivia's eyes darted to the paper, then back to him. She hesitated, just for a second, but Ethan caught it. "I don't know what that is," she said, her voice smooth. Ethan stepped closer, forcing her back into the house. "Cut the act, Olivia," he said, shutting the door behind him. "I know everything." She swallowed but kept up her poker face. "You're being dramatic." Ethan laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "Dramatic." He held up the paper. "This says I'm not Caleb's father." He let the words sink in. "But you knew that already, didn't you?" Olivia's lips parted, but no words came out. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You knew from the beginning. You knew Caleb was Jordan's son, and you let me raise him anyway." Olivia blinked rapidly. Ethan didn't let her finish. "You let me love him. You let me fight for him. You stood in court and let me beg a judge for custody of a child who wasn't even mine." His voice shook. "You stole 6 years of my life, Olivia." Her face twisted. "Ethan, Why?" he demanded. Finally, her mask cracked. Her lips curled into a cold smirk. "Because you were the better option," she said simply. Ethan's breath caught. She tilted her head. "Jordan? He was a fun distraction, sure. But he wasn't stable. He wasn't you." She took a step closer. "You had the money, the respect, the name." She sighed dramatically. "It was a simple choice, really." Ethan stared at her, his stomach churning. "So you trapped me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Olivia shrugged. "It's not like you were innocent. You weren't the best husband, Ethan."
Her tone was mocking now.
"You were too focused on your career. Too busy trying to be important." She crossed her arms. "I did what I had to do." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And what about Caleb?" His voice was sharp. "Did you ever care about how this would affect him?" Olivia rolled her eyes. "Caleb loves you, Ethan. You're the only father he knows. Why does biology even matter?" Ethan felt his nails dig into his palm. "Because I deserve the truth." Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia sighed dramatically.
"Fine.
You know the truth now." She waved a hand. "So what? What are you going to do?" Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and hit play. Olivia's voice filled the room. "Because you were the better option. Jordan? He was a fun distraction. You had the money, the respect, the name. It was a simple choice, really." Olivia's face went white. Ethan gave her a slow, dangerous smile. "You just confessed to everything, Olivia." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "I recorded this entire conversation," Ethan continued, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "And now, I have proof of your lies." Panic flashed in Olivia's eyes. "Ethan, wait." He turned toward the door. "Enjoy your new life, Olivia," he said coolly. "Because by tomorrow, you'll have nothing." Then he walked out, slamming the door behind him. By morning, Ethan's lawyer had filed for full custody of Caleb. The recording was sent to his legal team, the judge, and just for good measure, Jordan. Ethan didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. Jordan showed up at his office that afternoon, looking as pale as a ghost. I didn't know," Jordan stammered. "I swear, Ethan, I never." "I don't care." Ethan cut him off. "You're Caleb's father. You need to step up." Jordan swallowed. "And you? What about you?" Ethan exhaled. "I may not be his father by blood," he said, his voice steady, "but I'll always be his dad." Because Caleb was innocent in all of this. Ethan wasn't going to punish him for his mother's sins. Olivia lost everything. Her reputation?
Destroyed.
Her chance at alimony?
Gone.
The judge ruled in Ethan's favor, granting him primary custody of Caleb. And as for Jordan, He took responsibility, but Ethan kept his distance. Caleb was adjusting slowly. One night, as Ethan tucked him into bed, Caleb looked up at him with big, innocent eyes. "Are you still my dad?" he whispered. Ethan's heart clenched. He pulled the boy into a tight hug. "Always," he murmured. "No matter what." And for the first time in months, Ethan felt at peace. Because the truth was finally out. And Olivia? She had played the game for years. But in the end, she had lost everything. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.